There comes a moment in every woman's life when she finally realizes she was never asking for too much, she was just asking the wrong person. He acted like you were forgettable, replaceable, like he had all the time in the world while you waited on the bare minimum. But here's the truth. He didn't lose you when you walked away. He lost you the moment he started treating you like you were nobody. Now, regret isn't just a feeling, it's his shadow. It follows him into every text he hesitates to send, every face he scans, hoping to find yours again, every late night when silence answers back louder than you ever did. This isn't about revenge. This is about power, about what happens when a woman finally sees her own worth and stops handing it to someone who was never built to hold it. Let's talk about it. When you lower your standards, you send a message, even if you don't say a word. The moment you accept less than you deserve, you quietly teach him that what he's offering is good enough. You might think you're being patient, understanding, or giving things time to grow, but from his perspective, it often reads as approval. Approval of his inconsistency, approval of the way he only shows up when it suits him, approval of the bare minimum. In the early stages of a relationship, we all want to believe in potential. We see glimpses of who someone could be, and we start building a future in our minds based on those glimpses. We convince ourselves that if we just love a little harder, wait a little longer, they'll catch up. But here's the truth most people are avoiding. If someone thinks they already have you, they stop trying to earn you. And if they believe they can get away with giving less, they will. It's human nature. And in relationships, people will almost always give you what you're willing to tolerate. This is where it gets dangerous. Because while you're pouring in effort, energy, and emotional labor, he's coasting. He's watching you compromise, watching you stretch yourself thin to accommodate his moods, his schedule, his fears of commitment. And each time you do, he internalizes a message: I must be enough just as I am. I don't need to try harder. I don't need to give more. She'll stay. In his mind, he's average, and you're acting like that's acceptable. And once he believes that, your dynamic changes completely. You slowly shift from being the woman he wants to win to the woman who waits, from being a standard to being a safety net. And nothing kills desire faster than familiarity without effort. He stops doing the things he did in the beginning, because why would he? He already has you. He already knows you'll text back. He already knows you'll forgive the missed call, the cancelled date, the lack of clarity. You've made him feel like his presence is enough, even when his actions fall short. But here's the part he never saw coming. Your silence is not weakness. Your standards were never lost. They were just buried beneath hope. And the moment you finally remember who you are, the second you decide you're no longer available for emotional breadcrumbs, the game changes. Not because you want to play games, but because you've stopped playing yourself. Now, suddenly, he notices the shift. He senses that your energy has changed. Your texts aren't instant anymore. Your tone isn't pleading, it's distant. He starts to realize that the ease he took for granted has disappeared. And that's when the panic sets in, because the woman who once made him feel like a king has stopped treating him like royalty, and he has no idea how to earn it back. Regret begins quietly. It creeps in at night when the phone doesn't buzz like it used to. It settles in his chest when he sees you moving on, smiling, glowing, in a life that no longer includes him. He finally starts to see that you weren't just someone. You were it, and he treated you like you were nobody. But by the time he realizes the value of what he lost, you're long gone. Because the moment you stop lowering your standards for someone who never deserved them in the first place, is the moment you teach yourself the most important lesson of all: your worth is not a debate. It's a fact, and it's not up to him to recognize it. It's up to you to never forget it. He mistook your patience for weakness, and that's where everything started to unravel. You weren't desperate, you were devoted. You weren't passive, you were choosing to believe in someone. But when someone doesn't understand the value of your calm, your consistency, or your willingness to weather the storm, they start believing that they're the storm you'll never leave. That's when they begin to push boundaries, test limits, and take advantage of the love you offer without condition. You gave him space to grow, time to figure things out, room to be human, and instead of seeing that as grace, he saw it as an open door to do less. He didn't notice how many nights you kept silent when you wanted to speak, or how many moments you swallowed your own needs just to avoid making him uncomfortable. He didn't realize that your quiet wasn't surrender, it was restraint. It was you trying to protect something that was starting to crack, but he kept pushing, thinking you wouldn't move. He thought your ability to hold space for his uncertainty meant you'd never have the courage to choose certainty for yourself. He mistook your loyalty for fear, your softness for submission. What he didn't realize is that your patience had an expiration date. You weren't standing still, you were observing, watching who he became when he thought he didn't have to try anymore, watching how quickly he forgot what it meant to be intentional, watching how carelessly he treated the version of you that stayed, hoping he'd rise to meet her. And then one day, something in you snapped, not loudly but clearly. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't give a dramatic speech. You just shifted. You detached. Not out of revenge, not to make him feel small, but because you finally saw the truth. The person you were waiting for wasn't him. Not as he was. Maybe not ever. And that's when it hit him. Not immediately, but gradually. At first, he noticed your energy had changed. That your laughter didn't sound the same when he called. That your text was shorter, colder, less curious. He started wondering if you were seeing someone else, if your heart was drifting, but the truth was it had already drifted. He just hadn't been paying attention. Now the roles are reversed. Suddenly he's the one asking questions. He's the one reaching out first. The one wondering where you went even though you're still there, just no longer waiting for him to catch up. He begins to realize that what he thought was weakness was actually strength. That your patience was the deepest form of love because it gave him every chance to meet you halfway and he didn't take it. Regret has a way of revealing itself slowly. It seeps into quiet moments. In the stillness of the night when he scrolls through old photos. In the casual mention of your name from mutual friends. In the new girl he tries to date, hoping she'll be like you, only to find that she's not. That she doesn't listen the same way, doesn't forgive as freely, doesn't see him through the same lens you did. And he starts to get it. That the version of you who waited, who believed, who held space for his potential, that version doesn't come around twice. He begins to understand that your patience wasn't weakness, it was a gift. A rare, beautiful, powerful gift. One that he didn't recognize until it was no longer his to receive. He thought he was the reason you smiled. That your light came from his presence, his compliments, his attention. He believed he was the center of your joy, the spark behind your confidence, the one who brought you to life. And maybe for a while you let him believe that. Maybe you gave him credit for your glow because it felt good to have someone see it. But the truth is, your light never came from him. It came from you. It was never about him, it was despite him. Before he showed up, you already carried a fire inside you. You had dreams, self-worth, depth, and a resilience most people couldn't even recognize. You weren't waiting to be completed, you were building a life piece by piece with or without a partner. He entered a world that was already full and assumed he was the reason the sun was shining. But what he never understood was that you don't hand over your light to someone else. You share it. And when someone starts acting like they own it, that's when the glow begins to dim. In the beginning, he might have brought something new, excitement, affection, attention that felt validating. You responded with openness, with gratitude, maybe even admiration. That's what made it so easy for him to believe he was the reason you radiated. But what he didn't see were the years it took to become who you are. The healing, the heartbreaks, the self-discovery, the nights you held yourself together when no one else did. He didn't witness the becoming, he just enjoyed the result. And because he didn't see the work, he didn't respect the value. Slowly, he started taking your glow for granted. Your kindness turned into something he expected. Your energy became a given. Your emotional support felt like a duty, not a gift. And that's when things shifted. Because you can only shine for someone so long before you start to notice they're not reflecting it back. You begin to feel drained, invisible, like your light is being consumed instead of appreciated. And when you start feeling that, you begin to pull back. He might not have noticed at first. Maybe he thought you were just tired. Maybe he assumed you'd always bounce back. But then the light he thought was his started to fade. You stopped pouring as much into him. You stopped chasing connection that wasn't being returned. You didn't need to yell or explain or demand anything. You just started protecting your energy instead of giving it away for free. And that's when he realized your glow was never about him. He just happened to stand close enough to enjoy it. Now he looks at you differently. Not because you've changed, but because he's finally seeing you clearly. He sees you thriving without him, smiling in rooms he's not in, radiating confidence that has nothing to do with his validation. And it hits him. The thing he thought he brought to your life was actually what he borrowed from it. You weren't shining because of him, you were shining in spite of how little he truly saw you. That realization stings, because now he can't unsee it. Every time he remembers the way you lit up around him, he'll question how much of it was real and how much of it was just you being your natural self, generous, alive, present. And he'll know deep down that he never fueled that light. He merely stood in its path for a while, never realizing how rare it was to be near it, until he no longer is. You were his calm in the chaos, the one person who made things feel safe when everything else in his life was uncertain. You brought peace not just through your words, but through your presence, how you listened, how you understood what he didn't say, how you held space for him to just be. He didn't realize it at the time. He thought that kind of peace was standard, something he could find anywhere, something he didn't need to protect or appreciate. So he neglected it, took advantage of the stability you offered, assuming it would always be there no matter how little he gave back. The thing about peace is, it's quiet. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't throw ultimatums. It simply holds steady until it doesn't. And by the time he noticed your energy start to change, it was too late. The very calm he leaned on had grown tired of being overlooked. The safe place he once ran to no longer felt like home because you had finally locked the door behind you. What he didn't understand is that emotional peace is rare. In a world full of noise, of drama, of surface-level connection, you offered something deeper. You made him feel seen without demanding anything in return. You loved without manipulation. You gave him room to be vulnerable, to let his guard down, and he mistook that for you having no boundaries. He assumed your softness meant you'd never walk away. But even the most peaceful person has a limit. Even the most loving heart gets tired of being taken for granted. You may have given him chance after chance to meet you with the same calm you offered him, but he never did. He kept bringing chaos, expecting you to clean it up. He kept running to you when life got hard, expecting you to carry the emotional weight, and you did for a while. Because that's who you are, not because you're weak, but because you care. Still, love without reciprocity becomes a burden, and peace without protection becomes exposure. You finally saw that your role in his life had shifted from partner to caretaker. You weren't being loved, you were being used as a shield against his own inner chaos. And when you let go, when you finally chose your own peace over maintaining his, everything changed. Now he's left with the noise, the same distractions he once chased now feel hollow. The excitement he thought he wanted doesn't compare to the stability you gave. Every woman he meets after you might be fun, might be attractive, might even be exciting, but none of them will make him feel safe the way you did. Because emotional safety isn't sexy at first glance, it's not flashy, but once you've experienced it, everything else feels empty. And that's when regret creeps in. Not in a big dramatic moment, but in quiet ways. When he hears a song that reminds him of you, when he reaches for his phone in a low moment and realizes you're no longer the one he can call, when something good happens and he wants to share it but the first person he used to text has gone silent, he'll remember how you made him feel, how your presence felt like a deep exhale, how being with you wasn't about trying to impress but about finally feeling understood. And he'll understand too late that peace doesn't come around often, that the calm he once ran from is now the very thing he's chasing, and everywhere he turns regret follows because he let go of the only person who made his chaos quiet. You didn't leave with fireworks. You didn't storm out, slam doors, or make a scene. You didn't beg him to notice the way he was losing you day by day. You didn't warn him. You didn't plead for him to change. And that's exactly why it hit him harder than anything else ever could. You left quietly. You simply stopped showing up with the same energy. You stopped reaching out, stopped filling in the gaps, stopped making excuses for his lack of effort. And while he was busy believing you'd never leave because you'd always stayed before you slipped away, there's something powerful about silence. It carries a weight words never can. When someone expects noise, expects a dramatic exit, an argument, a breakdown, but instead gets nothing, it unsettles them. Because silence means something has shifted. It means you've stopped trying to be understood. It means your energy has finally been redirected from fighting to be seen to protecting your peace. And for someone who got used to your presence, your reliability, your emotional labor, that absence becomes deafening. He didn't notice at first. He thought maybe you were just giving him space. Maybe you were in a mood or busy or just waiting for him to reach out so you could start the cycle again. But the message wasn't in your silence, it was in your lack of reaction. You weren't playing a game. You weren't hoping to get his attention. You were done, not in a bitter, cold-hearted way, but in the way that happens when you've given so much of yourself that there's nothing left to give. You had been loud in your own way before. Loud with effort. Loud with care. Loud with your consistency and patience. You showed up. You gave him version after version of yourself, hoping he'd finally meet you at the same depth. But he thought your presence was permanent. He thought you'd always be there, no matter how little he gave. So when you finally walked, without explanation or a breakdown, he wasn't prepared. and that's what makes it sting. People prepare for conflict. They brace for explosions. But what they can prepare for is being met with silence from someone who once gave them everything. He expected you to fight. He expected a conversation, maybe even a last-ditch effort to fix things. But instead, you gave him nothing. Not because you didn't care anymore, but because you finally cared more about yourself. That's what he never saw coming. The version of you that didn't need closure or validation or one last conversation. The version of you that simply let go and didn't look back. And in the days and weeks that followed, when he finally realized you weren't coming back, that's when the regret started to settle in. Because now, every time he looks at his phone and your name isn't there, he feels the weight of your silence. Every moment he wants to reach out but hesitates, wondering if you'd even respond. He's reminded of how he mistook your effort for permanence. The peace you left in your absence now feels like discomfort to him. A quiet he never asked for but now lives in. The irony is that he thought you leaving without a scene meant you didn't care. But it meant the opposite. It meant you cared for so long and so deeply that by the time you left, there was nothing left to say. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was clarity. And for him, it became the loudest sound he's ever heard. There's something that happens when you finally detach, not just physically, but emotionally. It's not about blocking someone or deleting their number. It's about no longer needing their validation, no longer hoping they'll suddenly wake up and treat you the way you deserve. That moment, the one where you no longer flinch when you think of them, where their name doesn't pull on your heart the same way, it's quiet but powerful. And for him, it's jarring. Because when you detach, you stop being the mirror that reflects the best version of him. Instead, he's left to see himself clearly, without your light, without your forgiveness, without the lens of love softening his flaws. You used to see his potential. You saw more in him than he saw in himself. You spoke to the man he could be, not always the man he was. You were patient, supportive, loyal. You stood by him even when he wasn't giving you what you needed, because part of you believed in the future you imagined together. You believed that if you loved him hard enough, deeply enough, eventually he'd rise into it. But while you were busy building him up, he wasn't doing the same for you. He got used to being admired, used to being chased, and he forgot to earn you. He looked into your eyes and saw admiration, love, softness. You were the reflection he wanted to see, but the thing about being someone's mirror is they only value it when they like the image they see. And when that image starts showing their flaws, their avoidance, their lack of effort, their emotional immaturity, they turn away. That's what he did. Instead of meeting you where you were, he avoided the work. He kept showing up halfway, expecting you to fill in the rest. And for a while you did. But your heart grew tired. Tired of giving more than you received. Tired of shrinking yourself to keep him comfortable. And when the love you felt started turning into resentment, into silence, into emotional distance, you began to pull away. At first, maybe he didn't notice, or maybe he thought it was temporary. But slowly the reflection he once relied on disappeared. You weren't affirming him anymore. You weren't reaching out, checking in, holding space. And suddenly he had to sit with the version of himself that wasn't being softened by your love. That's when the discomfort began. Because now every time he looks in the mirror, he doesn't see who he was with you. He sees who he really is. He sees the man who let you down, the man who didn't show up, the man who took love for granted until it was gone. And that version of himself, he can't escape it. Because he knows deep down that the way you loved him wasn't ordinary. It wasn't transactional or shallow, it was rare, and he mishandled it. He'll try to find that feeling again, try to date someone new, try to replicate the comfort, the passion, the emotional safety you gave so freely. But it won't be the same, because the mirror is gone, and no one else will reflect him the way you did, not because they're not good enough, but because they don't know the version of him you imagined. They only see what he shows. You saw what was hidden, and even though he didn't rise to meet it, he'll spend a long time trying to find that reflection again. That's the quiet truth of detachment. It doesn't just free you, it forces him to face himself. And once he realizes the mirror is gone, so is the only version of himself he ever truly loved. And that's the thing about regret. It doesn't always arrive in one devastating moment. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, in the silence after your absence. In the stillness of a life that once held your energy. He acted like you were nobody, like your love was replaceable, like your effort, your presence, your patience, your peace, your light were all just there, automatic, assured. But now that version of you no longer exists in his world. He thought you'd always be waiting, but you didn't wait, you outgrew. You stopped lowering your standards, you stopped making excuses, you stopped pouring into someone who refused to rise, and you walked quietly, powerfully, without needing to prove anything. Now he's left to sit with what he lost, not just a relationship, but a version of himself that only ever existed in your presence. And that's the price of taking love for granted. So no, you didn't lose, you learned, you evolved. You took your power back without needing to raise your voice. And now while regret follows him, you walk in freedom. Let him chase your shadow. You're already walking in the light.